right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 16th Octant Community Meeting. We've got a fairly light agenda today, so we'll get this knocked out so we can finish merging our PRs and finally cut this release out the door.
Do you mean it this time, Sam?
Yeah. Oh, I'm muted?
I said, do you mean it this time?
No. Oh. Probably not. I can't guarantee any of this, but, we are closer in the sense that they are button clicks away as opposed to movements away. But anyway, we will...
We promise we are trying very hard.
We're gonna do the thing. All right, anyway, here's the agenda. Filters, you can go away. Boom, there we go. Cool. All right, let's see. What do we got here? First item on the agenda, adding dependency injection to Octant. So I do not have an item to this. Does anyone have anything to speak about this item?
Oh yeah, I can talk about it.
Sure.
Okay. Well, basically, we have been looking into how kind of set a single responsibility to the Dash.go. Dash.go is very much used to initialize a lot of services and other different things. And the main idea was to be able to separate this logic from our main function. That in this case is Dash is where it has a lot of responsibilities. So we kind of talk a little bit about how to do dependency injection, but Wayne showed us a little bit about the different frameworks, including the ones on Uber, Facebook, and Google. I think he likes a lot how Google framework for dependency injection works. And we want to create a plan and set a proof of concept to see if this will help us to clean up a little bit and separate concerns. And the main idea was to be able to have a plan where we can have a proof of concept and a deployment path, so we can see if we can do it only in once, or we can go create user stories related with this and go and clean it up a little bit as we go. So yes, I think I like it a lot, Wire, and it's something that we should all check out and see if we believe it's gonna do an improvement to our code. Yes, that's what I have.
Awesome. And thank you for bringing this up explicitly, because the strangeness is definitely something we've been aware of even before you joined this team, and we've never really gotten around to addressing it head on. And this is especially rampant, even from the testing level, all the way to just the amount of, we're seeing a ton of race conditions in the code, and also we've gotten a lot of weird patterns as a result, and we just keep talking about Dash.go, and really this is inherently the problem, right? And so we just need a better way to model how we're starting up dependencies in Octant, and also their entire life cycle as Octant is running.
Yeah, no, this is really great. I'm excited to see where this goes. It's been something, like Sam said, that we've had on our radar for a long time, and now with the team size being increased, we actually can start to attack things like this, which is pretty great. Yeah, super excited for where this goes. Thanks again, Luis.
Cool.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this dependency injection? There was a doc somewhere, or I believe there's a diagram and a doc floating around. Maybe that'd be good to add back into this HackMD document later if it's made public.
Yes, we can set up like how Octant data flow works in a diagram. This is something that this document is a very high overview. Doesn't have too much detail and it's short. The idea will be to build on it and try to put different things like the documentation you created, Sam, together with diagrams that Wayne has, and to be able to collect all this information in one place. And so if somebody wants to contribute, it will be an easy way to start, know how the data flow works in Octant. And yeah, it's pretty much that. So I don't know.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know if you guys have time to check the document, but as soon as we have something a little bit more robust, it would be nice to set up.
Yeah. So I was going to suggest that we create a GitHub discussion to start tracking what we're capturing here and the conversations we've had, and get them in a place that's a little more long-lived. And then I don't want to worry too much about like it being in draft. I would rather just go ahead and share what we have now, and we can start building on it out in the open. Like it's light, that's fine. But there's really no reason to not put out what we have now and just work through it in the discussion.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, sounds good. We will create a GitHub discussion. And we'll, yeah. And Luis, if you want just even a first pass, just for what you have so far, even just for like sanity checks or simple reading type checks, I can definitely take a look.
That would be great. I'd really appreciate that.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move on to the next item then. We've got exploring KCP and Octant.
Yeah, so I put this one up here. This was something that I started looking at a couple weeks ago. But then I was out for a bit, and so I got a chance to circle back to it a little more recently. I didn't have the demo that I was hoping to have prepped because I got pulled off to look at some of the streaming PR work that I wanted to make sure got landed pretty soon, since we have another team that's depending on it. So, but the short of this is that KCP is right there, a minimal control plane for kube-like applications. It creates a Kubernetes API server that's essentially empty, and then you can fill it with your resources and then query it like it's a Kubernetes API. One of the things that this tool has is it has a feature called a sinker. The sinker is essentially very similar to what Octant does now with its object store and its dynamic cache. It goes to a cluster, fetches those things in, and then provides you with a way to query them out. KCP uses a CRD. It does ship with one custom resource, which is the cluster custom resource that allows you to add a cluster object, which right now is just made up of a kube config, into KCP so that it can start doing the work to sync resources from that cluster. So the interesting thing about this is that Octant itself, it implements a lot of this logic and it's trying to do this work. But KCP being a project dedicated to this purpose means that it's going to actually have a better, it has to worry about less problems. And so it can really focus on doing this thing well, which is syncing resources from a cluster or multiple clusters. So I've spoke to that team and their Slack channel. They're open to the idea of well, they're really excited about running Octant on top of KCP in general, just because I think we'll both get some good feedback loops out of it and be able to improve each project. But they're also open to the idea of accepting pull requests that would enable Octant to kind of leverage KCP as a place to store its kubeconfig information, so that underpinning Octant is now instance of KCP running versus what we have now, which is our own custom object store. Another thing that's just an interesting detail about this is that if you go look at the KCP code, the syncer code that they have, it's like it's almost identical to what we're doing in our object store, right? It's like Sam and I were talking about this a little bit about how like it's really like 3 ways to get objects from a Kubernetes cluster. There's like you can use the Watch API, like standard, gRPC Watch API, and pull things down. You can create a shared informer, right? And this is all for out of cluster. In cluster is a little different, but out of cluster, you use the Watch API, you create a shared informer at cluster scope and you get everything, or you create namespace scoped informers and you get things for a particular namespace. These are like pretty much the 3 standard ways to get this information. And so when you start to go and look at all of the code that's out there for various projects that are doing a thing, which is fetch resources from Kubernetes, it's really funny. You see all the very similar patterns evolve and all of the like things that we've done and had to work around, and you see those being done in other places. And so for me, the motivation here is like if KCP is able to handle multiple kubeconfig files at once, it's doing a very similar thing under the hood for fetching resources, then kind of leveraging that as part of like making it a dependency for Octant, saying, hey, Octant's object store is essentially KCP now. I think we if it works out the way I'm hoping, and the project continues to evolve the way I'm hoping, we get a pretty big benefit of it. And that benefit being a group of people focused on this concept of how do we most efficiently, effectively, and reliably fetch resources from a cluster, right? And it takes away a whole class of concerns for us as an Octant project, and we can really focus on, okay, we have all these resources. Let's really focus on making them useful for a developer, capturing the object statuses, making actionable resolutions through the UI, things that we really want to get towards with Octant in the future. So I just wanted to bring that up. I'll create a discussion for this as well, because I think that way I can link to any upstream PRs in KCP, and we can talk about it as a team and kind of prep for any like just like exploring or demo stuff that I may be doing there. Honestly, I don't expect it to take very much time to get a demo up and running. I just need to find a nice 2-hour block to sit down and do it. So that's where it's at.
Awesome. So the idea will be that in the end, Octant will be storing kubeconfig data on etcd, right? Because KCP uses etcd as far as I know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so that will help on multi-cluster management also, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of one of the things in Octant, we've avoided being multi-cluster because we didn't want to deal with being multi-cluster. We just didn't have the resources. Whereas KCP, as I said, like they're focusing on this thing, like that's their domain. So we kind of inherit the ability to be multi-cluster from them potentially. That's just like taking a guess. In theory, that would work, but in practice, it might be a little more challenging. We'd have to see. I think it would be more. I think Octant might break in weird ways or unexpected ways, but it would be something we could address. To add a little bit more detail there, the way KCP does multi-cluster now is it produces there's a X Kubernetes cluster header that gets embedded into the responses and the requests that tells you what cluster it's for. And I believe they also expose a /cluster name endpoint that lets you list the clusters. So you kind of have to, at least this is my understanding, I think you have to take both of those informations and kind of use them to say, here's my list of clusters, and also here's where this resource, here's the cluster it came from, and you have to inspect the header to do that. So there would definitely be a little bit of lifting in Octant to make that happen, but in theory, it would be possible.
Yeah, I think this is really cool, and I'm really excited about this. I think especially because this is probably the most critical part of our code, in my opinion. Just interfacing Kubernetes. We had a lot of issues there, and we. It was really hard to find the optimal way to collect all that information. So if we can, have external layer doing that for us, that would be awesome. One thing on a negative side that kind of showed me off is first thing I noticed when I went to their Git is they're saying it's not a project, it's a prototype. So I think we need to be a little cautious there, and hopefully. They'll get to the level. I don't know how old the project is. Maybe Wayne, you can talk more about that. And, what's the plan kind of to maybe make it production ready?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, Milan. So one of the first things I did was just go and review the code. And that's kind of why I was calling out the syncer code they have is like the code we have, right? So I'm like, well, even if they abandoned this project, well, it's the same. It's the same. So it's not a big concern of mine, because I think some of the things they have is already a good foundation for doing it better. But the other part of this is that the team itself is very motivated to make that, like they have a plan, they have a long-term plan. It's a lot of the folks from the OpenShift group at Red Hat working on this. And it's also an Apache 2 licensed project, just like Octant. So our usage of it and taking advantage of what they have now, overall, I would say my concern from that angle is pretty low. Like, I think they're calling it a prototype just because a lot of the pieces that are multi-cluster are very exploratory. There's still like name collisions with certain CRDs and things like that happening. But overall, the single cluster aspect of this is very solid and probably a little bit better than what we do now in Octant, just because of its ability to have those individual CRDs or individual clusters captured as CRDs with a kube config. It will make kind of managing them and showing a list of them and importing and exporting them quite a bit easier than what we could potentially do now with Octant.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to see where this is heading. It's almost like, having this big part of our code outsourcing to another team. So it's almost like joining our team, right?
Yeah.
If we can find a way to work together, even if we have to, do some PRs on their side to make it work, it's still going to be a huge benefit long term, hopefully for us. So this is awesome.
Hey, so I'm Jason. I was randomly browsing YouTube, and YouTube said that the Octant community meeting was happening. I work on KCP. I'm one of the people working on KCP. This is super serendipitous. I am more than happy to answer any KCP questions you have here or elsewhere. I'm more than happy to talk about improvements, changes you'd like to make to KCP here, now, elsewhere. I'm really excited about the possibility of. I feel like Octant is this Kubernetes focused, but mostly Kubernetes API focused front end for things, and it doesn't necessarily need to care about pods or nodes or anything like that. And KCP is this very generic API server idea, and I definitely see a lot of to use a PM term, synergy between. KCP is this generic backend API and Octant as a generic front-end UI thing. So yeah, I don't have like anything else to say except if you have more questions right now, I'm happy to answer them. or otherwise offline anytime. This was the most amazing surprise today to see that you were talking about this.
That's great, Jason. Thank you. I don't have anything outstanding right now. You already saw the one thing I brought up in the Slack channel and responded there. So, I'm not sure at what point you joined. I was just kind of talking. Go ahead.
Maybe like 5 minutes ago. So
okay.
Now, I hope I didn't miss too much. But
no. Yeah, you caught most of the. I think you caught the gist of everything then. That's great. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be talking more and be seeing each other in Slack and on GitHub.
Absolutely. Great.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for popping in, Jason. It's an awesome surprise for us as well. And does anyone have any other questions about KCP and Octant before we move on to open Q&A? All right, cool. And let's move on to the open Q&A then. What is a proper way to generate plural for Kubernetes resource names? For example, pod to pods. Is there more context to this question?
It's not a trick question. It's something I ran into just when I was working on the resources, and actually more on the resource viewer side when expanding and collapsing things like deployments and pods, and trying just to make sure that we do that properly. I mean, there's always naive way appending S at the end, which I'm doing now, and definitely not the way to do it. So in Kubernetes world, is there a API, or what's the proper way to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, there actually is a pluralize, there's some code. I think it's in utils. I have to dig it up. There is code that does that actually will walk through and make a best effort attempt at trying to pluralize stuff, where it'll look at it, and does it end in Y, does it that kind of stuff, and will attempt to give you back the plural name. It's part of what's used when you try to convert GVKs to GVRs, and you do resource lookups that way. It runs through some pluralizing machinery. I'll find it and be sure to link it in the notes. If anyone knows it offhand, then that's great. But I'll have to dig for it.
Yeah, to help with that digging process, I believe it's part of the REST mapper. That's the place to start off with. So I'd probably just look up the REST mapper code, and then from there, see if they pull it in, because I believe the kind is always singular, and then resource is plural, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
Cool. I see. Yeah. The additional problem is this needs to be done on clients. So. Okay.
Yeah. So if it's like statically typed things that are on is that what you're referring to? Like things that what we
right.
generate? I guess we could make those, well, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's not enough of them to warrant like a big refactor to generate them. And maybe we just audit them and change it. Some things to IES and some, you know what I mean? Like maybe we just
right.
But CRDs have custom resources. You can look it up and run it through the machinery, because I know for those are dynamic, right? I think.
Cool. Yeah. So it seems pretty trivial. I just wanted to make sure to do it right, but. Especially considering things like hopefully currently run only in English, maybe that's not going to be the case always. And every language has its own specific way to make plural and stuff like that. So. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Yeah, no problem. I know there's there's also just I think generally, and this is just more context of the whole thing. There's definitely there's some people are a bit sensitive about the fact that resources are plural and wish they weren't. And I don't know that they'll ever change at this point, but I know it's something that has been talked about in Kubernetes land for a while.
Cool. All right. So sounds like we have a plan for this. And if not, we can always try to find a workaround. Maybe just show the plural things without ever using the plural word. But anyway, we can delve into that later. Does anyone have any other questions for open Q&A? Going once, twice. All right, cool. Well, thank you all for coming to this community meeting, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone.